It is 10 o'clock. So it feels very strange to be sitting here, but welcome to the launch of the 13th Alex Rider novel, Nightshade. And this is my first ever live stream on YouTube, and I'm quite new to it, as I'm sure many of you are. So I just hope it all goes well. In case you're wondering, my name incidentally is Anthony Horowitz. I'm the author of the Alex Rider books. I am filming this in London, where I'm in lockdown in my flat. And I'm doing this 3 days before my birthday in a very strange and very different world. And I just hope that all of you are well, are keeping well, and are keeping safe. So with no further ado, let me begin. First of all, it's an extraordinary thought, but it is 20 years ago that the first Alex Rider book came out, although actually I began writing a long time before that. I just want to tell you very quickly how I became a writer and how I got started, particularly those of you who are young and thinking about what you want to do in your careers. When I was at school, I was no good at anything. That's where I began. I became a writer basically because there was nothing else I could do. I was bottom in every subject in the school. I won prizes 3 years running for the most stupid boy in the school. And I went from classroom to classroom in a sort of fairly hopeless state. And I was privately educated. And if you were at a private school back in the day, you had to be good at one of two things. You had to be good at academic stuff, lessons, or you had to be good at sport. Now, I was a rather chubby little boy. I was also very stupid. So I was good at neither of these things. So I didn't really fit in. And my life changed because of really just two things. The first thing was I discovered the one room in the school where I was happy. And that room was the library. I remember as a kid, 10, 11 years old, desperately waiting for more books to come into the library. Not intelligent and extraordinary books and big, clever books. I like things like Tintin was one of my very favorite books when I was young. And Willard Price, some of you may know the Willard Price books. Lion Adventure, Shark Adventure, Cannibal Adventure, one of my favorites. And I still remember reading all these books and absolutely loving them and forgetting everything about my life in the school, how unhappy I was, how unpleasant the teachers were, how useless I was, how I was always bottom of the class. Books were for me a new life. And it seems to me that right now, books are more important than ever, because what is a book? A book is shaped like a door, and it opens exactly in the same way as a door. And a book allows you to travel to places where maybe you're not allowed to go or where you can't go, to have adventures which sort of, just show you a different side of life. And that was how I was when I was 10 years old, reading books and loving them. And the second thing that happened in my childhood was, this was a boarding school I was at. It was, we had to sort of, 8 little kids in a room in pretty nasty beds. I remember stuffed with horsehair, very uncomfortable, very cold. And at night, in this quite dark, oppressive and scary atmosphere, I began to tell stories to the other children. And this was my big breakthrough in life. The moment when I realized that despite what my teachers were always telling me, I actually had a talent. There was something I was good at, and it was telling stories. And so every night I used to tell the other children stories of adventure and escape and chasing and still sort of things I'm still writing today, really. And I always remember that the teacher used to come down the corridor and he'd hear my voice. You weren't allowed to talk after lights out, so I'd get pulled out and made to stand in the corridor. But it didn't stop me, because age 10, I knew without any doubt in the world that what I wanted to be was a writer. There was never a plan B. And if there's one thing I want to say to you today, if you're watching this live stream, is this: it's whatever you want to do in life, you can do if you believe in it enough. Always believe in yourself. Never let anybody put you down, whether you want to be, I don't know, a doctor, an astrophysicist, an actor, whatever it is you may want to be in life. Never let anybody say you can't do it, because nobody had any faith in me. My own father ridiculed the idea that I'd be a successful writer, but nonetheless, I believed in myself. And the funny thing is that you might think that because I've sold lots of copies and everything, that I'm a sort of, a big successful writer, but it was an easy journey. It wasn't. I remember that I wrote something like 10 or 11 books before I wrote the first in the Alex Rider series. And none of these books did terribly well. I mean, they sold sort of maybe 5,000, 6,000 copies a year, but that wasn't really enough to live on or to be considered a successful writer. And I often thought that maybe I should just give up because I just wasn't doing well enough. And the one thing that I refused to do was exactly that. I absolutely refused to stop. And after having written about 10 or 11 kids' books that, as I say, hadn't done terribly well, I had an idea. And this was an idea I'd had from watching James Bond films. Now, when I was growing up, the James Bond movies were a really big deal because for me, they were an escape. They were exotic places. They were women. I was in an all-boys school, so the only place I could see attractive women was on television screens or film screens. So it was that, and it was adventure and escapism. I loved James Bond, and so Sean Connery was the first James Bond, and I saw all those films. And then after that, it was Roger Moore. And Roger Moore went on rather a long time. He made, I forget how many Bond films. By the time he made the last James Bond film, A View to a Kill, he was 57 years old. And the idea I had was, isn't that too old to be a spy? 57? I mean, that's a spy's father or grandfather. And then I thought, wow, wouldn't it be interesting if James Bond was a teenager? And that little thought was like a light bulb going ping over my head and changed my life, because that was the moment really where Alex Rider was born, a teenage spy. Immediately I had the idea. I thought, you can't make him like James Bond. Make him the opposite of Bond. So although Bond is a patriot who serves his country and enjoys being a spy, Alex is the opposite of that. He's just a schoolboy. He's a reluctant spy. He's forced into his various missions. And I didn't write immediately. I say, as in my head probably for about 4 or 5 years. And then one day I sat down, and I was living in North London, and I'll never get the moment I was in my house up there where I was living, a little bunker at the bottom of the garden. And I sat down at a desk rather similar to this one, and I wrote this line: when the doorbell rings at 3 a.m, it's never good news. And I looked at the page, and I knew that there was something different about that, something special, something that I had never done before. There's something, I don't know, adult and authoritative about it. It doesn't sound like a children's book. The Alex Rider books were never thought of as children's books. They were always considered to be adult books for children. So, and that's what they've always been. And anyway, I wrote Stormbreaker and finished it. That's exactly 20 years ago to this day, pretty much. And it was the first book of mine that did really well. Instead of selling 4,000 or 5,000 copies, it sold 25,000 copies, and that was followed by Point Blank, and Point Blank sold 50,000 copies, and then the next one, Skeleton Key, sold 100,000 copies, until now, here I am sitting, having sold, I'm told, something like 19 or even 20 million copies of the Alex Rider books all over the world, which is, it's a fantastic sort of ride that I've been on over these 20 years. And just so you know, of course, Alex is going to be very soon seen on television. We finished last year filming Point Blank with Otto Farrant, a wonderful actor, playing Alex Rider. And that's going to be an 8-part television series. And any day now, we're going to be announcing who's going to show it and where. But it is going to be seen all over the world, and it will be on a TV screen here in the UK too. And that brings me, of course, to the other big event this year, which is this. Here it is, Nightshade. I don't know how many of you have managed to get this yet, or how it's reaching you. I hope it is. Nightshade, the 13th Alex Rider book. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read an extract from it. Let me just tell you a little bit about the story of this book. You may remember Scorpio, which was the sort of evil terrorist organization I invented, and which appeared in 4 or 5 of the books up until now, Scorpio and Scorpio Rising and 1 or 2 others. Well, Scorpio is finished. Alex has beaten them, but a new organization has turned up in the world, and its name is Nightshade. And to be honest with you, it does make Scorpio look a bit like a vicar's tea party, because these people are even more evil. And what is interesting about Nightshade and makes them unique, I think, is that they are all children. I don't want to give too much away, too much of a spoiler, but these are children who have been kidnapped and brainwashed by evil adults and turned into sort of an army of assassins and killers, and who are now for hire all over the world in whatever evil plot anybody is thinking of doing. And in Nightshade, they are rehearsing a terrorist attack on London, which is going to happen in the last chapters of the book. A really, really nasty event is being planned, and children are going to execute it. And Alex's job is to infiltrate Nightshade, to find out who they are, where they are, what they're planning, to stop them doing it. And in this book, he finds himself completely alone, because MI6, the organization he works for, has been disbanded and shut down, and he is literally on his own, surrounded by the enemy. Anyway, a little extract from the book before I turn to the questions that you have sent me and questions which I think are still coming in. I'll just set out what I'm about to read. The book opens in Rio de Janeiro, where a spy working for MI6 is murdered by two child assassins. A boy aged 15 and a girl aged 14 have killed him. But in the aftermath of this, the boy has not managed to get away. He has been captured and now he is in prison, and he's been sent to a prison which is run by a very nasty group called the Special Operations Battalion of the Brazilian Police. I say they're nasty, they're actually the good guys. These are the sort of the secret intelligence for the Brazilian police, but they are extremely tough people. They're known, and this is incidentally a fact, they're known as the Big Skull. This is because their uniforms have got a skull on the epaulette of their jackets, and their motorbikes have skulls on them. So the Big Skull is a Brazilian police force, and this boy is now in prison, being held. Rider in MI6 is in Brazil with the police, and he's watching this boy on a TV screen in the office of a police officer called Oliveira, and this is what happens. Warning, it is quite violent. And then the boy spoke. I want to go to the toilet. They heard him on the television screen and turned to watch. He had spoken in English. He sounded on the edge of tears. Oliveira thought for a moment, then picked up a radio transmitter and flicked it on. Take him to the toilet, he ordered. Crawley looked at him, alarmed. He can't hurt anyone, Oliveira explained. He's just cut a man's throat with a radio-controlled plane, Crawley reminded him, adding, I thought you said we were the ones who were too soft-hearted. It was too late. Oliveira's command had been relayed to a guard outside the room. Watching the monitor, they saw the door open and the man, dressed in the black BOPE uniform, walk in. The guard's name was Fabian, and he'd only been with BOPE for a few months. Although he was not married himself, he had several nieces and nephews. Perhaps that's why he felt sorry for the gringo boy who'd been brought in. He looked so young and innocent. As Fabian approached the table, he saw that the boy had been crying. Both sides of his face were streaked with tears. Don't worry, he said, heavily. I am here to take you to the toilet. He leaned down, unlocked the handcuffs. Thank you, the boy whispered. The moment his hands were released, he held them up to the side of his head, as if he were in pain. What is it? Fabian asked. A coloured stud he wore in his left ear, a tiny plastic ball on top of a metal pin. The moment he was free, the boy pulled it out and, even as Fabian leaned over him, he'd plunged it into the man's neck. The pin was actually a syringe. Squeezing the ball had released the contents, which would later be identified as carfentanil, one of the most dangerous drugs in the world. Carfentanil is used to tranquilize large animals, and it is 10,000 times stronger than morphine. Just 1 milligram will knock out a 5,000 kilogram elephant. Fabian was dead before he could realize he'd made 2 mistakes. He'd come into the room on his own, and he hadn't locked the door. The boy covered the distance to the door with astonishing speed. He knew that he was being watched and that the alarm would be raised in the next few seconds. He'd also seen that the guard just hadn't been carrying a gun. That was unlucky, but he didn't let it bother him. There were plenty of guns in the building. He'd get one soon enough. He opened the door, and at that moment, sirens went off, but now they froze, thrown off balance by the sudden explosion of sound, unsure what it meant. They saw the door swing open and a figure in a grey tracksuit emerge like some small demon out of a bad dream. Before they could even begin to take defensive action, he was onto them. The boy was small, but he was incredibly strong. His first strike, a spinning back punch, put all his body weight behind his fist, smashing into the first guard's face, lifting him clean off the floor and slamming him into the opposite for it. His colleague crumpled to the ground. The boy seemed to be in no hurry to attack him. The gun came free, but that was what he'd been waiting for. The boy swung round a second time, the flat of his foot shooting up diagonally in an axe kick straight into the guard's shoulder, causing him to cry out and drop the gun. For a moment, the two of them gazed at each other. Then, even though his whole arm was tingling and he was barely able to move his hand, the guard threw himself onto the boy, pinning him to the spectacles as if to see more clearly, and now he was clenching them in his fist. The 2 plastic arms of his glasses, the part that hooped behind his ears, contained very slender blades made from surgical steel, sharpened to a vicious point. When the boy stabbed forward, the point of the weapon easily broke through the thin plastic casing and plunged into the side of the guard's neck. The guard felt no pain. There was a brief flash of brilliant white light, the final punctuation mark in his life. 3 more men came pounding round the corner, and this time there was going to be no element of surprise. The scene told its own story. Somehow the boy had got out of his cell. Fabian was dead. 2 more men were down, one of them with a pool of blood still spreading around his head. The boy was there in front of them. He had to be taken out immediately. All 3 of them had pistols. They took aim. So there's a little bit of Alex Rider Nightshade with this boy escaping from prison. And what happens in the book, of course, is that Alex ends up sharing a cell with this boy, trying to become his friend, trying to find out what he can about Nightshade, and he's working against the clock as London is very, very soon going to be under attack. And I will just say one thing, but the action sequence in the last 2 or 3 chapters, which is the attack on London, was one of the most fun things I've ever written. I did a lot of research for it. I visited the locations. I can't say too much about it without giving it away, but you know, it really, I hope, does out James Bond. So there you are, a little taste of Nightshade. Let me look at my watch and see how we're doing for time. Oh, fine, 10:15. So I can move on now to some of the questions which I have been sent down the internet on social media. They're here in front of me. Sorry, old-fashioned of me to be going back to the paper, but there they are now for me. The first question is this: how is it that Alex Rider is always 15 years old in all the books? Thank you. And that comes from Billy, who says he's age 9 and presumably won't stay age 9. And actually, Alex doesn't stay the same age. In the first book, Stormbreaker, he was 14 years and I think about 2 months. I think I gave him the birthday of February the 13th, which happens to be one of my son's birthdays. And that book takes place in April, so he's 14 and 2 months. And by the time we get to Nightshade, Alex is 15 and 3 months. So, you know, he's had a busy year, but he has actually managed to get a year older over the 20 years that I've aged while I've been writing him. So he does move a little bit in age, but you're right, Billy. He's not like Harry Potter. He doesn't get a year older with every single book. Now, an unnamed 11-year-old asks, a lot has changed since you wrote the first Alex Rider book. What was the biggest challenge in keeping everything flawlessly up to date? Well, you know, the funny thing about that is that actually I don't need to do an awful lot to the books to keep them up to date. I think that's because, you know, at the end of the day, these are very classic adventure stories, and they're not actually tied down to a specific time. I'm careful not to use street language, you know, words like sick or wicked or cool, words which sort of, you know, are very popular at one time, but which can feel very old-fashioned only a year or even maybe only a month later. So I tend to avoid those words. And every 5 or 6 years, with working with the publisher, I revisit the books, we change the covers, and we look at all the sort of technology and the gadgets. But technology is very futuristic, so it doesn't go out of date. Some are very, very few of the gadgets have. I'll tell you, the one gadget I had to replace was Alex in, I think it was Skeleton Key. No, in Point Blank. In Point Blank, Alex has a compact disc player. And I'm sure some of you are looking at the screen saying, Dad, Mum, what's a compact disc? And certainly what's a compact disc player? Nobody has them anymore. It's a shame. It was a nice little gadget because it had compact discs being round, they span in it, and it was actually an electric saw. So I had to replace that with some kind of laser device. But by and large, the books don't seem to age too much, which is fortunate. And anyway, I do keep looking at them to refresh them. Now, Leo, aged 11, wants to know, why did you choose to create the character of Alex Rider as an orphan? Good question, Leo. Well, the simple truth of the matter is, and I'm sure many of you will agree with this, it is impossible to have fun or to have adventure while your parents are around. You've got to get rid of them. And in my stories, the easiest way to do that is to, kill them. So it is true, Alex has no parents. If you think about it, Harry Potter has no parents. Many, many children in this sort of fiction tend to lose their parent along the way, because the other benefit of it is that it means that Alex has to really fight for himself. There's nobody to tell him or to advise him what to do. He has to find his own inner strength, which is, I think, what really my books are all about. They are about empowerment, about the fact that everybody watching this has powers within them. They have strength, not superpowers necessarily. Alex doesn't have superpowers, but he's just very, very sort of, resilient. He's very confident, and he wins. So that's why he's an orphan. Sam asks, Are any of the people in the books people that you know, maybe with different names, or perhaps they have mutated from an idea of using a person you know? Well, Sam, good question. Yes, I mean, first of all, I mentioned the school I was at when I was young. I had horrible teachers. I have to be honest with you, it was a horrible school, horrible teachers. I am, however, a huge fan of teachers, particularly now. Teachers deserve a shout out for all the work they're doing and the effort they're putting in to keeping all you young people involved and educated and making sure that this hiatus, this terrible time that we're living through doesn't affect your educational chances. And you know, teachers are, along with health workers and so many other people, the modern heroes. So a big shout out for them. However, not to my teachers when I was a boy a long time ago. And I have named them all in my books. And I'm afraid to say I have killed every single one of them. So teachers appear in my books. Also, I take names out of newspapers, people whose stories turn up in the press interest me. I mean, every day when I read the papers, I get ideas for Alex Rider books, and I take a name and I disguise it. So you can't recognize them. I have to be careful, because if I use famous people as the villains of my books, famous people have expensive lawyers, and that could be very difficult for me. So I have to hide the names, but they are hidden in clever ways. They're anagrams. There are sort of all little clues and puzzles as to who they really are. But certainly on this live streaming, I cannot reveal who they came from. So an unnamed 10-year-old asks, will Yasin Grigorovich feature in any more spin-off books? And why do you like writing about him so much? And I can also go to a question from Jaden, aged 11, who asked me, who is your favorite character other than Alex? And the answer to that, Jaden, is it is Yasin Grigorovich. And will he feature in more spin-off books? Well, if any of you bought my World Book Day book, Undercover, there were two stories in there, one, The White Carnation and Metalhead, which are both stories about Yasin Grigorovich. And I'm fascinated by him. He is my favorite character outside Alex, because what I think is interesting about Yasin, for those of you who don't know the book so well, by the way, he is a hired assassin, a paid contract killer. He worked for Scorpia. He was the one who actually killed Ian Ryder, who was Alex Rider's uncle in the very first book. And he's sort of been Alex's nemesis, although unfortunately he doesn't survive all the books. Why am I interested in Yasin? I think it's because all of you watching this have a choice in life. You can be good or you can be bad. You can be heroes, you can be villains. And I think what's interesting is what will make you decide what it is you're going to be. Is it your parents? Is it your education? Is it where you live? Is it your friends? What is it that turns somebody into being evil? And I wrote a book called Russian Roulette, which is, I think, probably number 11 in the Alex Rider series, which is all about Yasin and shows how a perfectly nice boy, somebody not very dissimilar to Alex, the events in his life turn him into a killer. And it's how that happens. So I think I will continue to write about Yasin. I will bring him back for other books. He's based in Sydney. That earlier question about using people's names. I actually met somebody at a writing conference, I think in Norway, and his name was Yasin Grigorovich, and he wasn't a writer. As I recall, he was a children's illustrator, and I remember meeting him and saying to him, with a name like Yasin Grigorovich, you ought to be a contract killer, and now he is. Isn't that fun? I turned him into a killer. I often wonder if he's ever read those books and gets fed up with reading about himself. Anyway, Neo asks, are you planning on continuing the Diamond Brothers series or writing a spin-off series? I would personally like to read what Tim and Nick's childhoods were like. Oh, thank you, Neo. This is a question about Tim and Nick Diamond. I don't know if any of you know them. The Diamond Brothers books are probably less well-known than my Alex Rider books. They are much funnier. Their books are full of jokes. The setup here is that Tim Diamond is a 25-year-old private detective working in North London, but he is a very, very stupid private detective. He is so stupid, he cannot find a fingerprint at the end of his own fingerprints. And as for catching any diseases, as for catching criminals, he couldn't even catch a cold. So, I mean, that's Tim Diamond through and through. And the joke with him is that he has a 15-year-old, or is he 13? No, Nick is 13, a 13-year-old kid brother who actually does all the work and solves all the cases. So the older brother is stupid, the younger brother is smart, and the Diamond Brothers work together. And there are, I think, about 6 Diamond Brothers books. Falcon's Malteser, Public Enemy #2, South by Southeast, I Know What You Did Last Wednesday, a very short book with a lot of murders in it, by the way. So those are the Diamond Brothers books. What was the question now I think about it? It was, am I planning to do any more? Funnily enough, just last week, I started writing a new Diamond Brothers story. And the reason I did it is I'm not sure this is going to happen because I am busy, and it's also so difficult to write at the moment with all this sort of crazy world around me. But I had this idea that what I might do is to post a Tim Diamond story on my own website, anthonyhorowitz.com, and it would be free for everybody, and it will have lots of jokes in it, and hopefully cheer people up at these quite difficult times that we're going through. And I've got a title for it, and I have half a plot, and I've written the first 2 pages. So the answer to your question is that yes, there will be more Diamond Brothers books. I don't know if this book will appear or not, but eventually there's one I want to write called The Radius of the Lost Shark. All these books are based on films, by the way, and they're the titles give you the clue to which film. So these are all the films of Steven Spielberg turned into a crazy adventure with the Diamond Brothers. I will write that one day. How am I doing time-wise? Gosh, when am I meant to stop? I think about 1:30. Let's keep going. So Sam asks, I really like how you tell the exact make of the guns, cars, etc. Are they real? And if they are, did you research them? You may have noticed that even in the extract of this book that I wrote, I managed to tell you what sort of the policeman had a Taurus PT-92 semi-automatic pistol. And actually that is exactly the gun that the Brazilian police use, and the BOPE, that unit I was describing, are real. And so I do a lot of research to get all these things right. I do research them. I talk to people. The internet, of course, is a wonderful tool for writers like me to get all the technology. And I spend a lot of time trying to get things right. Why? Because if you're writing fantasy, huge adventures, bad guys trying to destroy the world, writing about, so I can name the gun and describe how it works, and I know about this unit of police officers in Brazil and all that sort of stuff, then you buy into the fantasy of it. So I'm not showing off with all this stuff, and I'm not doing it just for my own amusement. I think it does have a really good, if you're going to write, you should always write from strength. Write what you know about. Write about people you've met. Write about things you understand, because then you are in command. And that's why I do so much research into weapons and guns and everything else. Now, here's an interesting question from Claire. Coronavirus feels like it could have been created by an Alex Rider villain. How do you think Alex would cope with it? Well, first of all, let me say that I have no plans to write about the virus. Because, first of all, this is happening now. It's too soon to really turn it into fiction. But secondly, these are, no question about it, difficult and worrying times. And my books are meant to be an escape from this sort of stuff. I mean, that's why I'm saying that right now, the best thing you young people can be doing really is reading, because the reading is a journey that will take you away from all this and take you into much more happy places and places where life is more under control. And that's one of the pleasures of reading, the great escape. So to answer your question, how would Alex cope with it? Claire, is in fictional terms, he would never have allowed it to happen, one likes to think. But I hope I hope every one of you is being in your own way like Alex Rider, and just, bearing up and being strong and being supportive and being helpful and doing, whatever the government tells us, not going out, not socializing and all that sort of stuff. Sorry to get a little bit serious there, but it is a serious question. Oh, look, I've got one teacher here who has asked me a question, and her name is Mrs. Osborne. And she says, are there any moments in your books that you found particularly difficult to write? Yes. I don't like writing sad things. I've always tried to be positive. I think, that extract I read to you was full of violence and blood and gunfire and all sorts of things. And I hope that teachers and parents listening weren't horrified that I should have chosen something that wasn't more cheerful and uplifting. And I don't have any problems writing violence. And, I have strong views about violence in children's books. Isn't enough of it. But I do find it difficult to write sad things. And anything, if a children's writer, not that I call myself that, but if a writer for young people has got one responsibility, simply to be optimistic, this is your world. Now the world is in a mess, but we look to you, the next generation, to sort it out, to make it better. That if another virus comes along, it is the young people who will have grown up and who will have become scientists and doctors and teachers and all the rest of it who will guide us through it. So we look to you to build a better world than the one we are leaving you. And I have a great faith in that. But occasionally my books, and Oblivion springs to mind, which is the end of my Power of Five series, the 5th book in that. It took me 7 years to write Oblivion, simply because I knew it had a sad ending. So the answer to Mrs. Osborne is that if something is sad, I do find that quite difficult to write. Incidentally, also, that series, if you haven't read it, Raven's Gate and what's the next one called? Evil Star, then Nightrise, and something else. I can't remember the others, and then Oblivion. A series you might enjoy. They're a big fantasy series set in a world full of sort of magic. The idea for it, sorry to talk about my own work in this way, but just since I'm talking to you, I'll just mention it. This was a book about the world, a world maybe a bit like the world we're living in now, where everything has got out of hand, but instead of something horrible like a virus, it is sort of magic. It's devils and demons and witches and monsters who are in the streets of London and all over the world. And it's a series about 5 children who join forces to fight this sort of evil. And Oblivion is the last one in that. Very big book. As I say, 7 years it took me to write, so it wasn't easy. So what else have we got here? I have got Samuel, who said, I love the Alex Rider books. Thank you, Samuel. That's very kind of you. What are you working on next? Well, the funny thing is, and the other writers will say this to you, we're all in lockdown now. We're all self-isolating, but in a funny way, or not so funny, I've been in lockdown and I've been self-isolating for 30 odd years. I'm not saying it's the same. It isn't, because the silence outside this window, the fact that the world has stopped, makes me feel very strange and sort of very alienated. And I want life to get back to normal, because writers feed on life. We need life all around us to sort of to inspire us and to make us to get us writing. But anyway, here I am in sort of continued isolation, and it means that I am as busy as ever. And what am I writing at the moment? I've just finished a 12-part television series for an American TV company. I'm adapting one of my books, Magpie Murders, into a 6-part television series. I'm not writing any books for young people at the moment. I'm editing an adult book called, what's it called? Moonflower Murders, which is a big whodunit, which comes out in August. And I'm thinking about looking at James Bond, reading James Bond books, thinking, could I do a 3rd James Bond novel? If you haven't read the other 2, by the way, and you're aged sort of 11, 12, do give those a try too, because they're perfectly they're not too challenging, I think. So anyway, that's some of the stuff that I'm doing at the moment. Now hold on a second. My son just handed me a message over here on this sheet of paper. What does this say? It says, we're going to do some live Twitter questions after. When is that happening? Is that happening now? Twitter. I've got my son here. I'm actually in my son's part of the building, and his name is Nick. He was actually named after Nick Diamond. So not many young people can say that they were named after a character in a book. If he'd been a girl, I would have called him Holly, after the character in Oblivion. Anyway, yes, I have got. Look at this. This is modern technology for you. I hope I'm not going on too long. Well, you can turn me off if you're bored. So that's easily enough done, isn't it? So look, just 2 minutes ago, Becky Trotman sent me a question. And from her son, Jacob Trotman. Will there be any funny twists in this books or future books? Because there have been before. If you're talking about Nightshade, there are certainly twists in Nightshade, Jacob, but they're not particularly funny ones. It's a funny thing about the Alex Rider books is I tend not to put very many jokes into them. Smithers was one of my favorite characters in the books because he was always funny, the gadget master, but he's disappeared. He doesn't appear in Nightshade, but I think he might turn up in the next one. Although here's a funny thing. When Smithers comes back, you won't know he's there. That's a little clue about what I'm planning for him. So what here do we have? I've got a question from a huge Alex Rider fan. My name is Sir, is it C-E-R? Care? Sir? I don't know. I'm so glad there's a new book. Why is Alex called Alex Rider? Where did his name come from? This was my rather special Alex Rider birthday cake from a few weeks ago. I hope you like it. My father made it. God, what talented dad you've got. I'm sorry I can't somehow have a technology to feed this onto the screen, or actually to feed a mouthful to myself while I'm looking at it. But it's an Alex Rider cake which has got Boom written on it. It's got blue icing. It's got pictures all over it from the graphic novels. I assume they're made out of icing, not paper, and they're all edible. Fantastic cake. And happy birthday to you as well. As I said, it's my big birthday in 2 days' time. So I don't know about you, but I'm the same thing. No party, I'm afraid, this year. And what was your question? Where did the name of Alex Rider came from? Well, Alex started, names are terribly important in books. Don't ever forget that when you meet somebody in a book, their name is the first thing you find out about them. And often when we meet people, we sort of, we bond with them partly on their names. And Alex was the son of a very close friend of mine. So I borrowed his name. He was a kid. He was about 12 years old at the time, this is 20 years ago. And he spoke French. I remember he was bilingual. He did taekwondo, and he was also a very good looking kid. And I thought, gosh, that's a bit like my character should be. So I called him Alex. The name Rider came from the idea that cowboys in the Wild West ride, when they go down to their shootouts. And in medieval times, knights rode on horses to defeat dragons, etc. So I thought Rider was quite a good name for a character, Alex Rider. And it is sort of an interesting thing, isn't it? That if I called him Jacob Postlethwaite, for example, not a bad name, and in fact a name of a very good friend of mine. I'm not sure people would have really gone with it quite so much. Names do matter. So that's a good question. Thank you very much. Now, a question from a friend of mine. Phil and I met on Twitter. If you ever want to tweet me anything about my books or anything, you could always catch me. My name, Anthony Horowitz, is my Twitter handle, or AJ Horowitz, whatever. And Phil is somebody that I have met as a result of this. How many more Alex Rider books do I have in me? Well, the one thing I'm frightened of doing, Phil, is writing a book that is less good than the one before. And I try to make every book better, therefore, and more exciting. And, with Nightshade, I actually had stopped writing Alex Rider altogether after I finished what was a Scorpio Rising. I thought that was the end of it. And I only sort of got back into Alex again because I had so many fresh ideas. And I was very excited, but Never Say Die worked. And I think that Nightshade is even better. Definitely, when you get to the end of Nightshade, you'll see that there is one more Alex Rider book to come. And after that, I don't know. I mean, definitely one more, maybe 2 or 3. But as soon as I feel that the books aren't as exciting as they were, that the gadgets aren't as interesting, that the action set pieces aren't as amazing, then it'll be time to stop. And I just hope I can recognize it. It's always an important thing to work out when you've come to finish. My son is pointing at a question from Megan Katyama. I hope I pronounced your name, Katayama? I'm sorry, it's difficult for me because I've only got the names on the screen. When you get stuck during writing, what is the best activity thought you have to keep you going? Well, when I get stuck, normally what I do is I go out for a walk. I don't sit in my room staring at a blank sheet of paper, the dreaded writer's block that writers talk about. I don't believe in that. Sometimes I write well and sometimes the writing doesn't come. And here's a tip for all of you who are doing writing in this lockdown period, maybe doing stories or doing schoolwork. You've got to enjoy it. If you're not feeling the flow, if you're not feeling the excitement and the enjoyment of writing, then something has gone wrong. And for me, I will not sit at my desk sort of, trying to squeeze the words out of myself. I'll go out for a walk. I obviously can't do that now, but I can listen to music. I can read a book. I can watch something on television. I can go and chat to my wife. There are other things I can do. And then I just let my mind sort of, rest a little bit. And when I come back to my desk, every single time the ideas are there and I can write again. That's how it works. Thank you for that question. What do we have here? Eromdap, that sounds like an anagram of something. What, I wonder? No, I can't get it. My son asks, is being an author your only job? Well, it's all I've ever done. It's all I can do. I mean, some people have lots of talents and abilities. I have one. I can write. I can tell stories. I do a few other bits and pieces. I do sort of, I do a bit of journalism, and occasionally I've presented a bit of TV, and I'm doing this, which isn't writing, it's talking. I hope not being boring, trying to keep things lively, and such. But no, I mean, all I've ever done in my life is write, and I'm very lucky because I love writing. And I write like I breathe. It is my life, and and I with Alex Rider and other books, I sort of got successful, and so I've been incredibly lucky because I'm a one-trick pony. What do we got next, Nick? Let's see here. Suzanne Illy says, from Ben, age 12, a fan, would like to know, why isn't Alex allowed a gun? Good question, Ben. I made that decision very early because if there's one thing that I find not funny in the world, It's guns, gun violence. Obviously, in other countries, England, you can't have a gun. Guns are terrible weapons, and shooting somebody, I can't write that in a way that makes it fun. When I write violence, I can write also, the books are violent. I mean, I read a violent passage to you just now, but I hope it had a smile in there. I mean, the idea of a pair of glasses that conceal two knives, to me, that's a smile, even if that is, stabbing somebody. But a gun, it's not the same. So I made the decision very early on that the one thing I would never let Alex have was a gun. And in fact, he does have a gun. In popular writing, he has a gun, and he actually uses a gun. And again, going back to the question of Mrs. Osborne, that was a difficult passage to write because it was so serious, it was grim. And my books aren't meant to be that. They're meant to be entertainment. And no gun for Alex. Good question. What else do we have there? Let's see. So Rebecca's favorite Alex Rider book. Oh, Monty, tricky question. If I ask your mum who is her favorite child, assuming there's more of you in the house, how would she answer, I wonder? Of course, she'd say Monty. I suppose, I've already mentioned two of them. Stormbreaker is my favorite Alex Rider book because it was the first one. It was the one that introduced me to Alex Rider, and it was like meeting a friend for the first time. And here I am 20 years later with a new book out of him, still writing about him, talking about him, and such. He's been a huge part of my life. But Stormbreaker is not, I think, the best Alex Rider book. It's got lots of things in it I like. I would say, I'm going to name two others. Scorpia. I love Scorpia. It's the fifth Alex Rider book. It's the first one that introduced that evil organization, the Society for Criminal or something or other. I can't remember what the words stand for now. Intelligence and assassination are the last two letters in it. But also, which is the other book I like? Russian Roulette. I've mentioned that one. The story about Yasin. I've always thought that was a really interesting book. So thank you for that question. What else do we have here? From Lauren, aged 11, and I wonder if her name is Lauren Bennison, because that's Andrea Bennison has sent me this email, and Lauren asks, how long on average does it take you to write an Alex Rider book? Well, this one, which is actually the longest Alex Rider yet, something like sort of, gosh, how many pages is it? It's about 400 odd pages, yeah. This one took me about 10 months, I seem to recall. They normally take about 7 months. It's difficult to answer your question because when am I working? I work at home 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, probably about 365 days a year. But I'm not just doing the Alex Rider in that period. I might be doing a bit of Alex Rider, a bit of television script writing, a bit of my other work, journalism or whatever. So I'm doing other things. But that said, I think from and there's also different phases to writing a book. Part of it is thinking up the ideas. Part of it is structuring. A piece of advice for anybody who wants to be a writer. I think it really helps if you actually know what the beginning, the middle, and the end are going to be. And that can take me years sometimes, just thinking up the idea. This idea, Nightshade, the idea of a sort of a children's army of assassins. I actually had the idea for this something like 15 years ago. And it's been sitting up here, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And it's only sort of, last year that I decided it was time to write it. And that's how it popped. But this book, as I say, took about, I forget what I've been said now, 10 months, 11 months, something like that. The books normally take me about 7 months to write. Let me see what else we have here. My son is working behind the screen, doing a marvelous job with keeping all these questions coming in. Here's one from Lottie. Are you ever going to write a book about Alex grown up? Lottie, I did think about writing a book about Alex aged in his 20s. And here's the interesting thing. First of all, he was a complete mess. If you think about it, he'd had 13 adventures. He'd been chased around the world, kidnapped, knocked out, shot. He'd been fired into outer space. He'd seen people dying all around him. He'd, come up against all these evil, horrible people. He'd been manipulated by MI5, MI6. What sort of 20-year-old would he be? Well, the answer was he was a mess. He was completely hopeless. His life was on the rocks. And the book was going to be about how he found himself again. He was going to be something like 25, 26. And I talked about it with my publishers, Walker Books, and they just weren't interested. And I think they were absolutely right, because the thing about Alex is he is a reluctant teenage spy. Now, take out the teenage and you lose a great deal of what makes a character work. And what I've just described to you, this very unhappy character, would you really want to read about him? Even when Harry Potter turned up as a sort of an older character at the end of the Harry Potter books, I felt a certain sort of, do I really want to know? I mean, I so loved Harry Potter as a kid that did I want to see him as an adult? So I think the answer to your question in brief, not that I was very brief, is no. I'm going to leave him as a kid, we'll continue to write about him aged 14 and now 15 years old. So what I have here is a question from Noah, aged 11. Would like to know if you have a favorite gadget that you've written about. And I've also had a question from Matteo in year 6 at Middleton College Preparatory School, who says, are you going to start selling the gadgets that Alex uses? What a lovely idea. Oh my God, that's Matteo. Can you imagine it, selling Alex Rider gadgets? Some of them, of course, are lethal. I would be arrested immediately, and that would be that. So, no, I mean, I would love it if one day, maybe after the TV show comes out, they can, although are there any gadgets in the TV show? I can't remember now. But I would love it if there were Alex Rider gadgets of some sort on the market. And, I'd love to have, my favorite gadget was the Alex Rider bubble gum that I created in, I think, Eagle Strike, was it? And it wasn't so much, it was bubble gum, but you chew it and then you put it on something and it explodes. And I gave it a great name, which was 007. Made me laugh anyway. And, upstairs, unfortunately not in this room, I have got, somebody made me a packet of 007 gum, and I absolutely love it. I'd love to see that being sold. So it's a brilliant idea. I think we should, I'll ask Walker Books what they think. Maybe they can do something for the 30th anniversary of Alex Rider or something. As to where the gadgets come from, they all began really with my sons. I have 2 sons, Nick and Cass, and I used to sort of look at what they had in their pockets, apart from their hands, obviously, and use the things that they surrounded them as gadgets. And my rule was always simple. The gadgets had to be vaguely realistic. I love the James Bond gadgets, but some of them, the invisible car, for example, always struck me as one step too far. You've got to believe that the gadget works. And the second thing was that they all had to be non-lethal. That goes back a bit to the question about the guns. I don't really want Alex killing people. It's much better, I think, and there's enough killing in this world without having too much of it in books. It's more fun for me if Alex simply disables people, and that's what the gadgets do. So the bubble gum was one of my very favorites, and actually the spectacles in this one, which are quite lethal, I quite enjoyed thinking of those, thinking of how do you carry a weapon into a high security police cell. Well, nobody would think of looking at the thing. Hello, what are you doing? Come here. Sorry, this is my dog who's come. Any more questions? How are you going to celebrate 20 years of Alex Rider? This is a question from the Book Brothers. I love the Book Brothers. Good to see you guys. Thank you so much for joining this session. The Book Brothers, I've met on social media, on Twitter, and they are what they are. They're brothers who read books, and they review books, and they write about books, and they are, I think, 2. Are there just 2 of them? Yes, of my favorite people on Twitter. What was the question there? I've forgotten it now. It was, how am I going to celebrate 20 years of Alex Rider? Well, I was going to have a big party tonight, and there was going to be cakes and drinks and friends and all that stuff. And sadly, that's gone out the window. So I think I have a birthday, as I've said already, on Sunday. So I have a celebration then as well, just with my family. And I guess that's what we'll do tonight, is open a bottle of something and just raise a glass to 20 years of writing Alex, and to all my fans and people who've read the books and who've been so generous in supporting me, and to the teachers who have had the books in their schools, and to the librarians who have stocked them in their libraries, and to the booksellers. Oh my goodness, and this is a terrible time for booksellers, independent booksellers and the chains and such. Goodness knows we are missing you and need you, and look forward to those doors being opened once again. Someone is going to have to know when to stop. I'm seeing it's at 10 to 11. Let's take, shall we say, Nick, 3 more questions and then call it a day? Let's see what we have here. A question from Oscar, aged 8. How did you get into the James Bond series, and how old were you? Well, actually, Oscar, I was your age when the very first James, gosh, it shows how old I am now, I'm afraid. I remember seeing Dr. No at the cinema when I was about 8 or 9 years old. That would have been about 1963. Gosh, such a long time ago. I was stuck in this really boring, horrible, grim, grey boarding school in North London. And this film, it was different then. When a Bond film arrived, It only opened in one cinema at a time. It wasn't a worldwide release. You had to go and stand in the rain for hours to get in to see it. There were no computerized booking systems. There were no computers. So, going to the film was a real event in itself. And as I said earlier in this talk, it was so transportative. It transported me away from Harrow and North London to an exotic, exciting world, and it made a huge impression on me. And after that, I began to read the James Bond books. There was a man called Ian Fleming who wrote the novels, and they are brilliant. And I think people forget just how good they are. In fact, some of you sitting in lockdown, if you really want to try and stretch yourselves a little bit, read Dr. No, or that's probably a good one to start with, or Goldfinger. Mums and dads watching this, there are going to be the 1 or 2 paragraphs you wish your kids hadn't read, but they're not so shocking these days, not to a younger generation. And these books are terrifically good. And I am so proud of the fact that I have done 2 of my own, Trigger Mortis and Forever and a Day. And I am, as I said earlier, I haven't yet been commissioned to write a 3rd one. And, everything is still very much up in the air. But I am rereading the books at the moment and looking at them and thinking about, could I do another 3rd one? And then should I do a 3rd one? And I very much hope I will do a 3rd one. We will see. But that's something I'm looking into. But thanks for that question. What else do I have here, Nick? Anything on that? I've got a teacher up there. Can I see what Miss Cleveland says? You write, I'm going to take a question from Miss Cleveland first. You write excellent baddies. How do you come up with such awful examples of humanity? And do you have a favorite? Gosh, thank you, Miss Cleveland, for your question. Baddies. Well, I've talked a little bit about using my teachers as some and my favorite baddies. I always like Damien Cray. He's the pop singer in Eagle Strike who wants to blow up half the world. And I like him because he thinks he's doing good. He's actually an anti-drug campaigner, which is a good thing to be anti-drugs. But his method of dealing with it, which is to blow up all the drug fields in the world using nuclear missiles stolen from the Americans, probably not a smart idea, not going to be very helpful in that thing. So I like him. He was based, dare I say this very loosely, on Elton John. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get sued now by Elton John. No, I'm not. I love Elton John. He's a brilliant man, great worker for charity, wonderful performer. But it just occurred to me that what would happen if somebody like Elton John went mad? And that was the inspiration for Eagle Strike, the idea that a pop singer could do all this damage to the world. But it began with him as a thought, just he's sort of one of my heroes. And I've got a question here from Elliot in Blackpool. My favorite part of your books was where Alex escaped the car compactor in Stormbreaker because it sounded dangerous, tense, and exciting. What has been your favorite part in the Alex Rider books to write, and why? Gosh, Elliot, what a great question. I would like you to know, incidentally, that when I wrote that section in Stormbreaker about the car crusher, I actually climbed into a car crusher. I got permission from a builder's yard, a wrecker's yard, to go inside a car crusher, and I got them to start it up so I could actually feel what Alex would feel as these huge metal walls began to close in on me with me inside the car crusher. And I can tell you one thing I learned from my research, which is that if you stand inside a car crusher, and I actually would say to you, please never do, but if you happen to find yourself in a car crusher and the walls are moving in closer and closer and you get scared and you shout to the operator, please stop, that's enough. The engine is so loud, he can't hear you. So that's something I learned from going into a car crusher. But you asked, what was my favorite section to write in the books? It's tricky, because I've written so many books now, and I love everything I write. I said to you earlier that loving what I do is so much a part of my writing and everything. I would say that the fight in outer space in Archangel, I really enjoyed writing that because it was zero gravity. To actually have a fight in zero gravity, I'm always looking for new things to write about, and things that have never been done before. Action sequences, Alex in Afghanistan, which is in my series of short stories, Secret Weapon, that was published, I think, last year or the year before. Alex in Afghanistan has a stunt in it involving a horse and a chase, and I loved writing it because I thought to myself, no one has ever done this before. But when people read this, they're going to see things that they've never seen. And when you think about it, 25 James Bond films, all the Mission Impossible films, and all the other action films, the Bourne films and everything, so much adventure, so much stunt, so much shooting, so much, so much epic adventure. What hasn't been done? And what makes me excited is to still be able to come up with stuff that has never been done. So I will just also say that I've mentioned this earlier, the final chapters in Nightshade have never been done. And I think the Bond producers, when they read it, might think to themselves, gosh, we should have thought of that ourselves. Not instead that I'm comparing myself. They do brilliant work and I love their films. But nonetheless, it's sort of a Bond film that hasn't been done. And it's in Nightshade. Now, I'm being told by Nick in the background I have time for just 2 or 3 more questions. Then we're going to call it a day and get on with what other things we have to do. So I can go to, well, the tweet is from someone just H. H is the villain in Line of Duty. I mean, it can't be the same H. Never mind. Are there going to be any more Alex Rider films? Oh, actually, this question comes from Millie, aged 13. Well, Millie, Stormbreaker was made all those years ago, and now Point Blank has been done as an 8-part television series. I am so excited about the TV series. I've seen only the first 4 or 5 episodes. I did not write it incidentally. It was written by a very good writer called Guy Burt, who has absolutely picked up what makes the Alex Rider books work, and he's made the show, I guess, a little bit more adult than the books and such, but what he's done so brilliantly is he's captured the character of Alex and also promoted his best friend, who's played by a wonderful actor called Brennan O'Connor, playing with Otto Farrant, and the 2 of them are sort of best friends. And what's his name in the books? Tom. That's right, Tom. And I love seeing the 2 of them on the screen. And there will, I think am I allowed to say this? There will definitely be a 2nd season of Alex Rider, Millie. So yes, we're going to continue down the line. Point Blank is going to be followed by another of the Alex Rider books. I'm not sure which one yet. Haven't spoken to Guy, but that's going to happen. And maybe a 3rd. Who knows? So yes, more Alex hitting the screen soon. What else do we have here, Nick? You've got a question for me somewhere? William, age 9, says, how did Alex become a spy, and will we ever be able to meet you? Well, that was sent 2 minutes ago. William, thank you so much for sending me a question today. I'm actually quite easy to meet. Obviously not now, not in these terrible days, but normally I'm out on the road. I do lots of festivals. I was going to do Oxford, but Oxford's got cancelled. I was going to do Hay, but Hay has been cancelled. But I do literary festivals up and down the country. So I don't know where you live. It doesn't say on the screen, but come along to one of my sessions, or sometimes I'm in bookshops. If you go onto my website, anthonyhorowitz.com, it normally tells you where I'm going to be if I'm doing anything in the public eye. And if you come to one of my sessions, please come along and shake hands and say hello to me. I love, one of the great things about, doing signings and doing book festivals, which actually I've enjoyed this. I hope you have too, but it's not the same as actually being with you in the room and being able to talk to you and seeing your faces, actually, seeing if you're enjoying this or sort of nodding off or leaving. If there's anybody actually, am I just talking to myself? Is anybody still there? I don't know. But William, come along to one of my sessions and come along and say hello. I live in the centre of London, so you can always find me there too, or if I'm not up in Suffolk. Are we there, Nick? Or a last question? Here we go. This is the last question today. And it comes from Charlie. Or actually, we've had this question, is how many more Alex Rider books do you think you might write? Let's have one more question, Nick, because I've answered that, Charlie. I think there'll be 1, maybe 2. What's the last one? Let's see if we've got anything here. Or maybe we're done. Maybe we're finished. Anything else? Names, I've done that one. Gadgets, we've done that one. No, I think we're through. I think we've done enough. That's the end of this session. I am, however, going to continue to appear on your screens because my publishers have asked me to read Stormbreaker. So I'm going to, is that the one I should read? Hasn't everybody read that already? Well, if that's the one they want, that's what I'll do. I'm going to read Stormbreaker in installments, and you can tune into that. A Diamond Brothers story might turn up on my website if I get around to writing it. I just want to finish by saying to everybody, I hope you're staying strong in this time. Keep well, keep safe, keep reading, because reading has never been more valuable to us than it is now. And I hope we will meet each other again in happier times very soon. And thank you very much for today.